It's the Wilk Report. I'm Michael Wilk coming to you from Cleveland, Ohio. With me is Larry Bernard. We're going to discuss the Justice League movie and, go into some of the details, the gory details. All right, so let me share screen real quick here.
Okay.
All right, so box office. As Justice League crosses $320 million, can DC films be saved? That is a big question. All right. It says in the next 2 weeks, we'll decide the fate of the Justice League movie. It'll open in Japan and Pakistan later this week and debuts in Lebanon on the 30th. The film should be over or under the $325 million worldwide mark as of yesterday, with a solid $10.55 million Tuesday in North America for a new 111.9 million 5-day cumulative. At least it's already past Green Lantern and Catwoman, which is not saying much, unfortunately. So the gory details.
And even if it breaks even, then we have to have the news discussion of, can the Aquaman movie keep the DC extended universe going?
Yeah,
the entire project's going to be riding on Aquaman. What alternate universe have we all slipped into?
Yeah, this is. Yeah, I have to say it's pretty pathetic. My last podcast, this was actually pretty expected. First of all, because you've got two directors working on this project, Zack Snyder, who stepped down partway through the filming to attend to his personal problems. His daughter passed away, unfortunately. So Joss Whedon came in to finish the movie. And so you've got two directors with competing voices and narrative styles.
But also, they're both very good at two very different types of filmmaking. So their visual aesthetics clash, but you could see watching the movie, I could see what Joss Whedon, if he wasn't meddled with, would have made. I could see what Zack Snyder unmeddled with would have made. But unfortunately, they made this movie for Warner Brothers, so they were definitely meddled with.
Yeah, and that seems to be a running formula, because Christopher Nolan, with his Batman trilogy, seems to have enjoyed a great deal of creative control. But once Zack Snyder stepped in, it's like Warner Brothers decided, oh, we don't trust you to do this properly, so you're not going to get final cut. You're not going to get full creative control. And plus Snyder, despite a very powerful Watchmen theatrical release, I've got the extended edition on DVD. It's epic. But there's a world of difference between that and Man of Steel, and Batman versus Superman was just such a mess. I just was dreading the Justice League movie, because it seems like DC was trying to build off of the foundation that Marvel had built, or tried to build from the roof down for its own cinematic universe. And if they had started off with one-offs like Superman, then gone to Batman, then Aquaman and Wonder Woman, and then after all those had done, do a DC Justice League movie, that would be fine, because you're building up to something. But with this, they had Man of Steel, then went directly to Batman versus Superman, and now Justice League. Wonder Woman did better at the box office simply by not being Batman versus Superman, I think. Yeah. But, that's, again, not saying much.
Warner's management of this intellectual property has been reactionary. Marvel started doing really good, so of course we got to get our movies rolling back in. And hey, we got a guy who does great comic book visual styles in his movies named Zack Snyder. We did his passion project for him, Sucker Punch, which was kind of bad, but at least it looked really pretty, so he's going to want to do what we want him to do. So we'll have him make Man of Steel, but we need to make it different somehow. It can't be the same. So we're going to do the same formula, because, of course, all superhero movies fundamentally have the same type of formula, but we're just going to tweak it in certain ways that it's darker, more depressing, and more dreary than Marvel movies. Oh, everybody hates that. Oh, well, you know what? Maybe they just don't get it, so we're going to double down on that. And, oh, wow, Batman v Superman's even worse. Quick, let's go all the way the other way as much as we can on Suicide Squad. Oh, well, now Suicide Squad's a giant, chopped up, muddled mess. Well, no one's paying attention to Wonder Woman. Oh, wait, people like Wonder Woman? What? Oh, okay. So let's try to make Justice League more like Wonder Woman. So let's bring in Joss Whedon. And, oh, well, this is just a muddled mess as well.
Yeah, and again, because you've got two competing visions. Because, like I said, Zack Snyder was directing, had to step away because of his daughter's suicide, unfortunately. So, that leaves Joss Whedon to come and finish what really had been Snyder's baby. But there's just you can tell that
Snyder
this is
was
not so
making
much Whedon finishing up. It's more along the lines of Whedon co-directing, essentially, because Snyder just didn't get enough usable material to make a more or less complete movie. So Whedon almost had to. You can tell where Snyder's vision begins and ends, and then where Whedon's comes in. So I don't know, why Warner Brothers expected this to succeed. Given all this,
it's baffling. And the thing is, you could see that he wanted this to be like a typical trilogy with a trilogy of character arcs for the main three characters. And you could see where they should have paid off. Now I'm really wondering what decisions wasn't he allowed to make in Batman v Superman that could have made all of this make more coherent sense. Because I don't think we can blame Snyder or Whedon for what was done, because I don't think there was just two creative visions. There was a couple of dozen in a Warner Brothers meeting room that were the final decisions.
So, yeah, and now reports are that Ben Affleck is stepping down from Batman altogether. He was set to direct, decided, okay, you know what? I'm not directing this mess. I don't want my name attached to this, so I'm just going to be in it, and I'm not going to direct. Now reports are that he's not even going to be in it. So they're going to have to recast for another Batman because he's done.
I think in 20 to 30 years, he'll admit when he's old and retired, well, I quit on the DC Extended Universe because Warner Brothers didn't know what the heck they were doing.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're going to hear in like 20 to 30 years when it's okay to admit the truth.
Yeah, and what's sad is that it takes like decades just to be able to say that when it's obvious right now here in 2017.
Yeah.
I mean, you're pretty much like, dude, you're jumping ship because this is a mess and no one wants anything to do with it because it's a career killer.
Yeah.
At this point.
And one thing they so don't want to be the Avengers in this movie, but yet they pretty much recreated the all the heroes are in the lab arguing scene from the Avengers without any of the compelling ephemera connecting it to the overall plot of the movie. And there were several points where you could see Joss Whedon kind of reusing similar plot elements and structure from the Avengers. And if he had a whole movie, that would have made sense. But just pasting that here to like hold these two scenes together doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, and I remember watching a video by Midnight's Edge, either the main one or it's After Dark roundtable discussion, but the somebody had made mention of movie making by checkbox, where you're checking off all these different boxes. Okay, we need to write the script around this checklist that we've got. Like, okay, for example, Star Trek. Okay, we need the Klingons to show up. We need the alien chick to show up. We need Kirk to die and be resurrected or whatever. Or maybe that was Into Darkness. It's kind of hard to tell. Because Abrams movies are pretty indistinguishable from one another. They're all a complete mess. But yeah, I mean, it just seems like DC is doing everything wrong, and so is Universal. Actually, they tried to cinematic dark universe with starting with Tom Cruise in a remake of The Mummy, which was epic fail again because no one's really doing. They're not doing anything right. They're starting backwards and trying to work their way back to the beginning, where they should be starting it. Okay, you do. Like Universal, they just announced their lineup and their actors slated before they even had a movie. And then Tom Cruise comes in with the Mummy remake, and it's terrible. So, I mean, I don't know how they expected to make a universe out of this. So now Universal is saying, okay, we're not going to do this right now.
This was a mistake.
Yeah. And, you know, but, I notice a difference in Marvel where they started off, like I said, building one-offs. It really started with Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk when they relaunched in the mid-2000s, because you had Iron Man and then you had the Incredible Hulk with Edward Norton, which, frankly, I actually am not pleased that he was replaced going into the Avengers movie, but I understand he's difficult to work with. But the
Mark
movie
Ruffalo's
actually
been good
served its
though.
purpose. It reintroduced the Hulk and brought it into the cinematic universe that Marvel was building, because you've got Robert Downey Jr. coming in. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it, but he comes in at the end of the Incredible Hulk to talk to General Ross and say, "Hey, I'm putting a team together, and I might be able to solve your problem by basically taking the Hulk off your hands." So that leads into then of course Captain America does his standalone movie, and Nick Fury comes in at the end, played by
And then Iron Man
right. So they're
introduced Black Widow, and in Thor they also introduced Hawkeye.
yeah, and right. So they started with these standalone movies, and you didn't even realize that they were building up this universe until you had seen maybe enough, like 2 or 3 of them, and realized, wait, they're hinting at something. Are we going to see an Avengers movie? Okay, I didn't know I wanted this, but now I do.
Yeah.
And right, so that's how Marvel did it. But with DC, they decided,
we want to make $1 billion movie today.
Yeah, and they didn't want to do any real build-up, so they started off doing Man of Steel, which I thought was terrible. I mean, it's like they're doing the New 52 version of Superman, which is crap. I mean, say what you will about Superman Returns, but it at least sought to finish up the story arc begun by Richard Donner with Superman the movie in 1978, and then obviously Christopher Reeve was dead by that point and couldn't do the film. But even before then, he would have been too old, so they would have had to recast. But you get the sense that they had a vision of where they wanted to go with it. And Nolan's trilogy for Batman, he had a beginning, middle, and end, and a vision for what he wanted to do with the story. But
they
now
have no vision other than making money.
Right. And that's probably the worst way to go about making any kind of cinematic universe. But this is a pretty sharp contrast between now and back in the 80s and 90s, when it was DC on top of the movie universe and Marvel was just unable to compete.
But again, when you're looking at that, you had Tim Burton had a strong artistic vision and direction. You had Richard Donner with a strong artistic vision and direction. And then the DC movies started falling apart once they started getting in other kinds of directors and mixing in things into the soup pot.
Yeah, because Joel Schumacher came in, tried to really kind of do his own thing, but they were trying to confine him to Tim Burton's theme, so he tried to keep the look, but it just became so campy. And I was like, okay, clearly they're trying to do the Batman 60s TV show using the Tim Burton look, and it didn't work, obviously. So I don't know how they even got to make 2 movies under Joel Schumacher's direction, but yeah. So
I mean, it comes down to the fact that the Marvel movies have Kevin Feige, who has a vision, who knows what he wants to do with all the pieces that he has in the toolbox, and he also knows that given the right sequence of events, he might be able to get things out of Fox's and Sony's toolbox as well and put that all together.
Yeah, and it seems to me that, again, Nolan, seems to be the exception to the rule, where he had his vision, but then once he was done with it and Warner Brothers, saw what Marvel had done, because they had been bought out by Disney, so they didn't want to be caught out lagging behind. But they kind of forgot. I mean, maybe if they had tapped Nolan to at least produce and have a handpicked director, but
I mean, he does have a production credit on Man of Steel.
Right, which is not saying much because, I mean,
we don't know what he actually did, if anything.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah, because it seems like he just kind of let Snyder run wild, but then the studio kind of came and took over that project. So, it's anyone's guess as to how much creative control Nolan actually exercised as producer. And of course,
How,
on Batman versus Superman, there's just nothing left of Nolan
how
anywhere.
weird will it be if Sony figures out how to make the Valiant comic book universe movies work before DC figures out how to make their comic book universe of movies work?
That would be interesting because I never actually got into Valiant comics, which uh,
Valiant has a lot of interesting properties that were kind of half to three-quarter baked in the comics, but I think a movie production could make them better. And they got Dave Bautista in talks for a fourth movie that's not even in production or approval yet. That's just basically like, hey, we're going to need to make this movie eventually too. So he was in a movie about the character. I forgot the actual name of the character, but basically he's the timeless immortal warrior who lives on for thousands of years and fights various and sundry villains for reasons. And they have a good mythology in the Valiant universe, and with its prior iterations, I don't know how all the ownership rights would work with when Acclaim had it as a comic book company briefly, and the stuff that they've borrowed from Gold Key Comics way back in time. So they have a lot of stuff they can mine there. And it would just be funny as heck because the people at Sony who ruined Spider-Man aren't involved enough to be able to ruin this.
yeah, and I find it really interesting because let's go ahead and go back to share screen here for a moment here. And all right, so yeah, because getting back to Justice League, it's like if they like Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, which is, I'm kind of on the fence with this because on the one hand, Patty Jenkins seems to have taken more of a page out of Richard Donner's playbook for making her movie, but even then, what I've been hearing versus the gushing reviews is that Wonder Woman succeeded really kind of like by not being as bad as Batman versus Superman.
Well, there was that.
But
also, you really want to compare Gal Gadot to very early Arnold Schwarzenegger when he wasn't really a good actor from a technical standpoint, but he had a lot of physicality, a lot of charisma, a lot of energy, and the right directors were able to utilize that until he developed the better acting skills.
He developed better acting skills?
Well, I mean, if you look at like Conan versus a movie he made like 10, 15 years ago.
Okay, so yeah, I'm still not seeing it, but but I just don't like Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, that's fair.
I never really thought much of him as an actor, and then his off-camera shenanigans just turned me off because I do think
so. Well, you look at Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Yeah,
you compare him in The Scorpion King to him now. He had something, but it took a while to refine him into a better actor.
Yeah, I was actually kind of surprised by End of Days where Schwarzenegger actually seemed capable of expressing some kind of emotion other than being a robot. But that's one movie out of a like 40 some odd year acting career, which is not saying much. But my own problem with Gadot is, well, first of all, she's a war criminal serving in the Israeli army and kind of cheering on the genocidal destruction against Gaza a few years ago. So I just refused to put money in her pocket by going to see any of her movies. But, as far as her off-screen behavior, beyond that, I think one of the reasons why she's been more popular, I mean, she just loves to flirt with everyone. I mean,
yeah.
So some of the panels she's been on, she's wearing like these low-cut dresses, and I mean, she doesn't have much cleavage to show off, but she's going to show it off anyway, and really kind of seduce people more. And I think that's kind of her gimmick, which seems to be working right now. But she's 32, and in 10 years, is that going to work?
The other thing in the Justice League movie that kind of threw me for a loop is they really didn't give Jason Momoa anything to work with. That Aquaman character was just done so terribly. I mean, he's done Khal Drago. He did, I forgot the name of the character from Stargate Atlantis. He could do the type of character that they were obviously wanting to do with Aquaman. But I think somewhere there was a meeting note that said, well, look, Conan the Barbarian under the water is going to be too complicated for audiences, so we need to make him kind of a dude bro.
Yeah, and that again, I thought was a complete. I mean, I just never thought he was a fit for Aquaman because Aquaman, if you want to keep the look, go with something like the original Arthur Curry character from the comics, where he's he kind of looks more modern,
Yeah,
and kind of behaves more modern. It's not until much later in the Aquaman mythos that it becomes this like king of Atlantis and whatnot. But at the beginning, he was more or less just a superhero who lived underwater and happened to be gifted with these powers. But but as that developed, it got into it, and then he went through during the '90s. He went through this change where they cut off his hand.
I'm so Eddie,
with a
so
trident.
itchy the character. I have a hook on my hand.
Yeah, and then he ditched the orange chainmail shirt, which I mean, obviously they needed to modernize the look, but obviously they didn't stick with it because he's gone more or less back to that classic look.
Yeah.
But with Jason Momoa, they made him look kind of like Conan the Barbarian, but act more like whoa, dude. It's like, no, sorry, no, we can't get into this. So pick a way that he should look and have his acting match his appearance.
Yeah.
All right. If you look at Tim Burton's Batman Returns, where you got Danny DeVito as a Penguin, he's actually the Penguin as portrayed by Dr. Caligari.
Yeah.
Which, and he kind of behaved
gruesome.
Right. So, right, which actually is why he got removed from the Batman franchise at that time, because he was too scary for kids. And apparently Warner Brothers decided, no, we want something that can appeal to younger audiences, not something hiding under their beds. but visually though, it is very, it had a purpose to it. And DeVito did a wonderful job, I think, bringing the character to life.
And the other two characters that kind of baffled me how they were designed and were brought to fruition is it's clear Flash and Cyborg were the millennial characters for the team. They played Flash as he acts kind of neuroatypical, but that's because he's got the super speed powers. And Cyborg, it's like, it's a checkbox. We need a black guy. And he's in that cartoon that the kids liked. Not the new one, but the original one. And he was in the new 52 version of the comic, so it kind of makes sense because that's what we're borrowing a lot of to make this script.
Yeah, and frankly, I wonder why they even bothered to include Cyborg in this one if they were going to do such crappy CGI on him, because...
Oh, God, that was terrible.
Right, I mean, it's not... If you go back to the original look of the Cyborg, he appeared more human than machine. And over time, obviously, both in the comics and in the animated series, they made him more machine than man. But he still retained this very human look. And if you're going to do a CGI costume, you want to make sure it looks good. He looked more like a CGI cartoon, like something out of a bad Mortal Kombat sequel.
Much like Steppenwolf.
Yeah, and then of course they had Henry Cavill because for some reason, because he's working on the Mission Impossible sequel and he's got this mustache on for his character, but I guess Tom Cruise decided, no, you're not allowed to shave it off or replace it with a glue on because that will look inconsistent. So
actually, I saw an article where Warner offered to pay to put a CGI mustache on for Mission Impossible, and they actually did like a demo using Batman v Superman footage with the mustache to show them how that looks much better than removing a mustache from somebody.
Right, and frankly, why even bother? Because this is Hollywood. You can get a glue-on mustache and make it look real. You don't have to CGI anything. When you've got a practical and less expensive, but they spent all this money digitally removing the mustache from Cavill, and it looks awful.
And there's so many of those shots where they zoom in on it too. It's some of these shots where it's like a tight shot on his face and you just can't look away.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, and it goes to this long-standing problem in Hollywood that's been going on for at least a decade and a half now, is this over-reliance on CGI, even when you don't have to. I mean, if you compare how other films have done CGI, like say Shin Godzilla last year,
Yeah.
you actually could not tell the difference between the CGI Godzilla and the puppet that they used for the.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could tell in some of the shots that were more obvious, but the point is, you actually could not tell what was CGI and what wasn't.
They
And
made a real effort.
right, and this is a much lower budget Japanese, because Japan doesn't put really any budget into their movies unless they manage to get really major international backing. But most of their stuff is low budget, so they've had to learn how to make the most out of what they've got to work with. And so you're bringing Godzilla back after something like 12 years. You can't half-ass it, especially if you're going to try and use it to compete against the legendary Godzilla.
Yeah.
You can't afford to do a half job. So they made it look good on a fraction of the budget. And so you're telling me that Warner Brothers, with so much more resources, cannot simply have Cavill shave his mustache, and then if he's got to go back
glue.
Right. I mean, come on, man. I mean, but then again, maybe that might have not worked out as well, because if you look at the Hobbit trilogy, Peter Jackson went ahead and used the Red Epic, which is a horrible camera, but you could actually see a lot of the glue lines on the actor's makeup, which is just horrible. I mean, there's no excuse for that kind of poor cinematography.
And so they picked Cyborg as a character because of the fun-loving comic book and cartoon version of the character, but we need to make him be a dark, brooding, Am I Frankenstein's monster character for half of the movie.
Yeah, and I wonder if they had to cast a black actor, why not get Jon Stewart Green Lantern?
Yeah, and they actually did a Green Lantern, spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen the movie, they did a Green Lantern tie-in in a flashback in the movie, so that would make much more sense with the story structure.
Yeah, but the thing you have to remember is the Green Lantern movie pretty much failed. Ryan Reynolds was crap in that one, and
but he wasn't really given anything to work with.
Yeah, which it's not. It's just it's over CGI'd and not enough story. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Roland Emmerich movies. I mean, you can put all the flashy special effects and big name actors in there, but if the story is shit and the actors are just showing up and saying their lines because they've got their like $10 or $20 million for the movie, and you don't require anything of them, well, they're not going to give a good performance, because why should they?
Yeah.
So, I feel very much like they've taken all the worst aspects of Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin movies, all the worst aspects of J.J. Abrams, and kind of like tripled down on them, going in with like DC, Warner Brothers, Universal. I mean, it's just awful.
I mean, the smartest thing they could do is take 5 to 10 years off for the DC Comics movies and just suck up the fact Marvel's going to be making bank off their movies for years. Suck up the fact that Valiant will probably figure out how to do it, and that will be the thing that gets Sony out of its ditch inexplicably. And then they need to come out with a strong Superman movie, followed by a strong Batman movie, followed by a strong Wonder Woman movie. And then after they get those 3 strong movies all strung together, they say, okay, what's our next phase of movies?
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned taking time off, because I do think that they should do that. But here's my worry. If they don't spend that time writing good screenplays, if they're just going to produce the same drivel that they've been producing, I don't see how taking 5 years off is going to accomplish anything. I think
and what's really going to happen is Aquaman's in the can. So Aquaman's coming. And Wonder Woman was popular enough that Wonder Woman 2's coming. And Suicide Squad did okay enough that they're going to try Suicide Squad 2, but it's going to have The Rock in it, so they're thinking maybe that'll be good. It's just sending good money after bad.
Yeah, and with Suicide Squad, I don't know why they even bothered because first of all, it was just complete and utter crap. I mean, you don't want to bring back Jared Leto's Joker. The few bits that they used, and according to Leto, he, they filmed enough footage with him to make his own Joker movie, but most of that got left on the cutting room floor. But from what I've seen of the deleted scenes, it's not all that great anyway.
It's better that it was on the floor.
and plus they so radically changed the look of the Joker in this. He's loaded up with tattoos. He's got like these metal grill teeth. It's just ridiculous. And also Leto's off-screen antics, apparently some of his pranks went in order to stay in character. For example, leaving a dead pig allegedly on your castmate's trailer doorsteps. I don't know that actually happened. It sounds kind of like one of those false rumors Hollywood likes to start to gain publicity.
He put in milky context so he couldn't see, so he could play a blind character. He could just be that type of loosely wired person.
Yeah, and no, I don't think he was actually in the movie about The Room.
He was not. He should have been, though.
yeah, because God, what was the name of that guy who played in
Tommy Wiseau, but Franco's playing Wiseau in the
James Franco. That's who I was talking about. Yeah, James Franco was playing Tommy Wiseau, which I guess was okay, but I thankfully have managed to avoid seeing that movie at my local art house movie theater, even though it plays pretty regularly over there.
Yeah.
But I just am not interested in going to see that mess because after enduring Manos: The Hands of Fate, the uncut, unvarnished version, not the version which I've seen, and it was far superior. But I just am not interested in going to see a movie that was intended to be serious and ended up being a comedy.
But let's end with some good notes about the Justice League movie. At the end of the movie, the characters were acting like human beings who actually were friendly-ish towards each other.
Yeah, which is really, again, that's more Whedon's influence. And Snyder presumably would have had them be engaging in glorified pissing contests. And also, you can kind of tell, there's a whole different direction for Wonder Woman where a lot of it is like upskirt shots as opposed to Patty Jenkins' movie where she's more or less playing it straight. And, it's like, quit trying to sex up Wonder Woman so much. I mean, yes, we know the actress who plays her is a flirt and is rather shameless about it. That's her gimmick. But you don't have to mimic that on screen, okay? Focus on what made the actual movie work.
They also gave her a character arc where she was anxious about being a leader and sending people out to their death again. It's like that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
You had sort of a payoff on Alfred's character arc from Batman v Superman, but not really, because it was like this movie's happening in a parallel universe to Batman v Superman.
Yeah, it kind of is, because it's supposed to be a sequel or quasi-sequel a la the Avengers, and plus the way they resurrected Superman is just
lame.
Yeah. Although why they even had to kill him off at Batman versus Superman, because basically the whole Batman versus Superman movie was them trying to replay the Dark Knight Returns battles
in Doomsday.
Right, but that was a whole different story though, and they've got Jesse Eisenberg playing Lex Luthor, who really kind of channels Larry Drake's Dr. Giggles.
Yeah.
And it's like, why? Why do you do that to Lex Luthor? There's a very distinctive look.
The idea of Lex Luthor as the Google guys and the Facebook guy, that was an interesting take on Lex Luthor. You could have done something with that. But also being a mad lunatic, not so much.
Yeah, because it's like they were trying to have him channel the Joker, and why? I mean, how have we established Lex Luthor? Okay, he's a genius. He's a mad scientist, sort of. It's usually done it to get some kind of revenge plot on Superman or pull off some crime caper, but it's not because he's insane. It's just because he has an agenda and he's using his scientific skills in order to pull that off.
Yeah.
Now, when they rebooted back in the 80s for Crisis on Infinite Earths, they turned him more into a businessman, but they still retain that evil scientist genius.
Yeah. And now they've kind of morphed that into he's the billionaire transhumanist. And because he's the transhumanist, that's why Superman is the existential threat that he has to fight.
Yeah, because he's the ultimate human, as opposed to this transhumanist thing where I guess it's where Doomsday comes in. But again, the way they handled it, it's like they were trying to mash up The Dark Knight Returns with the Doomsday storyline, and then Eisenberg is basically, like I said, I don't even know why they even cast him as Lex Luthor or had him play it.
The rumor is they were going to have it be a Joker Lex Luthor team up villain movie. Then they cut that because they thought that would be too complicated, so they combined the plot points and the story notes for the Joker and Lex Luthor together. That's the popular urban legend / internet rumor.
Oh God, that would be terrible if it's true, but it wouldn't surprise me because going by the story, it seems clear that they probably made that decision, even if they never admit it, but they probably made it, and fans kind of figured out what was going on. So
also, Henry Cavill, when he didn't have to play a brooding, murdering sociopath, was enjoying himself playing Superman.
Yeah, which really gets me because there was a story in the comics and how they could have had Henry Cavill play Superman for Man of Steel. Is there was a story where there's this vigilante group that decides to use their superpowers to take it to the next level and just start killing bad guys, and even people whose
Superman versus
more than crossing the street illegally, they would go ahead and use extreme measures to go ahead and take care of that.
The problem is they did that as a really good animated movie.
Yeah, and right, but here's the resolution of the story is Superman takes him to an uninhabited planet, kind of tricks them into thinking that tricks the leader into thinking he's killed off all of his comrades, and so the leader thinks, hey, you showed your true colors, and our way works. But then Superman, does a big reveal. Yeah, I kind of faked you out. Your friends are alive, and my way is better because I'm not, I'm not some idealistic fool. I'm trying to set an example, and if I want people to do better, I have to show leadership. That's basically the crux of his argument. So, and that was a really good story, I think. You have Superman appear to cut loose and give in to his darker impulses, but it's really him faking you out and teaching you a lesson on, why it's important to set that example.
And the thing about Man of Steel is that the bones of making that into a decent movie were there. They just were assembled by a crazy person or a committee of crazy people.
Not so much a committee of crazy people, just a committee of people who they neither understand comics or care to understand comics. Kind of like with the CBS, they neither understood Star Trek nor do they care to, and so they come up with this mess. And Alex Kurtzman trying to prove that he can do his own version of Battlestar Galactica reboot in the Star Trek universe, and it's terrible. It's not working. CBS announced a season 2 for this, but I don't know who's going to put the money up because Netflix probably won't.
Realistically, CBS could say, "Hey, we got it free last season from Netflix. We could do a second season. We can retool it. We can focus it in. We can make it tighter, and then we can build back what we've lost from there." But that's not going to work.
Yeah, because once you've insulted and alienated the audience, it's very tough to get them back. So, and it just seems like this is a pervasive attitude in Hollywood these days, where you've got executives who are so out of touch from the actual process of filmmaking and telling a good story. They've forgotten that that's why movies are successful. Right, because if you don't tell a good story, if your characters are cookie cutter, not compelling, you can't sympathize with them. I mean, a lot of these people clearly never read Blake Snyder's Save the Cat, where he, which was required reading for me in my screenwriting course. You you have to have a compelling character. Someone people can invest their emotions in. Uh, the reason the Tomb Raider movies didn't take off was because Angelina Jolie's Lara Croft, there was no moment in any of those movies where her character was made even remotely sympathetic, and so audiences could not relate to her. And so she's basically just filling out a costume and doing all these stunts on camera,
Yeah.
but there's no real story there. The character is not sympathetic, so people don't care about the character, and so it just
which is why the upcoming Lara Croft movie is going to be better.
One hopes.
They're basing it off of the reboot video game where like they had Lara Croft's first adventure being she was trapped, marooned on an island, and that was how she developed her skill set to become the Tomb Raider.
Yeah, which to me, I just hope that they send people back, because if you look at Blake Snyder or Sid Field, I mean, they pretty much wrote the books on screenwriting, but it seems like no one's teaching that anymore. And
the thing that kills me is characters. We go back to all these very contentious pop cultural movie things like Ghostbusters 2016, Batman v Superman, Star Trek Discovery. The characters are bad. They're not well designed. They're not well thought out. They don't do things because they're people that exist in the fictional universe. They do things because it's in the script that they do things.
Yeah, and like I said, it's a movie making by checkbox where you're checking off the box. Okay, this has to happen. We'll write the scene around that. But there's nothing tying any of this together. It's like it's, and I kind of partly blame Christopher Nolan for this, where he's making Batman as to what he represents. He's more of a concept, even if it's not explicitly stated.
But Nolan's Batman is a actualized character who makes decisions, makes choices. Those choices influence the world around him.
Right, and his motivations too. So yeah. So I mean, and
I just watched a YouTube video about that actually that says his version of the murder alley scene is the best one because. Okay, I need to wrap this up.
Okay, yeah. So, but yeah, it seems, like you were talking about. I mean, that version of the alley scene was so much better because, it's meant to give Bruce Wayne, real motivation here. I mean, there's a kind of a hint of that in Tim Burton's version, but that's kind of done a little bit better, I think, in Nolan's because it's more realistic. It's not so dreamlike. But it goes to.
Thanks for inviting me to your podcast, but I got to go.
Okay. Well, thanks. This has been Larry Bernard, and we've been talking about Justice League and a whole bunch of other stuff. I did record a little bit of material for an episode on the Terminator. Unfortunately, I've been having some technical difficulties in editing, so as soon as I figure those out, I will get that uploaded. But thanks for joining us, Larry. Take care, everybody. Good night. We're out.